My name is Celeste, 35F. My husband Julian, 33M, and I had been married just under 4 years. No kids. An apartment we could barely afford in a neighborhood he liked because it felt ambitious. That word mattered to him. Everything had to signal upward motion, like our life was a billboard and not a home. Julian had been in a mood all week. Snappy, impatient, correcting me in that sharp tone he used when he wanted to remind me he thought he was smarter. If I paused before answering, he'd sigh. If I disagreed, he'd smirk. By Tuesday, I was already exhausted, and it was barely 7 p.m. He came home late, shoes thudding, tossed his bag on the counter, and immediately started in on me for not having dinner ready. I reminded him calmly that we'd agreed to order takeout. He rolled his eyes and said, "God, you always remember things wrong." That was the spark. I told him I was tired of being talked to like I was incompetent, not yelling, just stating it. He laughed, actually laughed. Then he launched into the familiar script. How I was too comfortable, how I lacked urgency, how I should be grateful he saw potential in me. I said, I got offered that promotion last month. He waved it off. In the same city, that's not real growth. Something in me tightened. I asked him quietly why he even stayed if he was so disappointed. That's when he snapped. He leaned against the counter, crossed his arms, and said it loud, sharp, and deliberate, like he wanted it to cut. "You really think you're the best I can do?" The room went dead silent after that. No music, no traffic noise, just him staring at me, waiting for me to scramble, to reassure him, to beg. And that was the moment something very calm settled in my chest. I looked at him and said, "You're right." He blinked, confused, smiled like he thought he'd won. He had no idea that was the last thing I was ever going to say as his wife. He stared at me like I'd spoken in the wrong language. There was this half second where he clearly expected a follow-up, an apology, a scramble, something like, "I didn't mean it like that," or "I'll do better." Instead, I just stood there weirdly calm, hands at my sides. Julian scoffed and shook his head. "Wow, so now you're agreeing with me? That's pathetic." Normally, that would have hooked me. Normally, I would have defended myself, explained my job, my plans, my timeline. That night, I didn't feel the urge. I asked him one question. "Do you actually respect me?" He didn't answer right away. He rolled his eyes, grabbed a glass, poured himself wine he'd been saving, and said, "Why does everything have to be so dramatic with you?" That was my answer. I went into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, not to sulk, just to think. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A Slack notification from work. I hadn't even opened it yet, but I already knew what it was about. 3 weeks earlier, my company had offered me a promotion. Bigger role, real jump. The catch was relocation. NYC. Julian didn't even let me finish the sentence when I told him. He said New York was overrated, that he wasn't uprooting his life for my career, and that if they really valued me, they'd make it work here. That night, while he slept facing away from me, I replied to the email. "I'm in." By morning, I already knew something else too. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to negotiate, and I wasn't going to give him time to talk me out of it. I was leaving the next day. I woke up before my alarm, which almost never happened. Julian was still asleep, curled toward the edge of the bed, phone face down in his hand like he'd passed out mid-scroll. I watched him for a moment. Not with anger, not even sadness, just distance, like he was already someone I used to know. I got up quietly and made coffee. No toast, no breakfast for two, just me standing in the kitchen, rereading the confirmation email from HR, like it might disappear if I blinked too long. It didn't. By 8:15 a.m., Julian shuffled out, hair messy, already irritated. He grabbed a mug and frowned when he saw I'd used the last of the good coffee beans. "Seriously," he said. "You couldn't save any?" I didn't respond. He noticed the suitcase by the door, then a pause, a sharp inhale. "What is that?" "I'm leaving," I said calm. No build-up. He laughed, not amused, dismissive. "For work. You're being dramatic. We didn't even finish the conversation last night. There's nothing left to finish." His smile faded. "You're not serious." I told him about the promotion. NYC start date in 3 weeks. I told him I'd already accepted. I didn't ask him to come. That part landed harder than anything else. "You decided this without me." He snapped after everything I've invested in you. That line almost made me laugh. Instead, I said, "You made it pretty clear you thought you could do better." He stepped closer, voice rising. I was angry. "You don't blow up your life over one fight." "It wasn't one fight," I said. "It was clarity." He called me selfish, small, accused me of running because I couldn't handle the truth. Told me no one in New York would put up with me the way he had. I didn't defend myself. I picked up my bag. He followed me to the door, still talking, still trying to provoke something. Anything. When I opened the door, he finally said, "So what? You're just leaving your marriage." I looked at him then. Really looked. "You left it first," I said. I walked out. By noon, I'd signed a short-term lease, booked a one-way ticket, and told my manager I'd need relocation assistance fast. Everything moved smoothly once I stopped asking permission. That night, Julian texted me 13 times. I didn't reply to a single one. The next 24 hours felt unreal, like I was watching my own life through a window. Julian oscillated between rage and disbelief. His texts came in waves, angry paragraphs followed by half apologies, followed by threats disguised as concern. "You're throwing everything away. You'll regret this. You can't survive out there without me." That last one stuck out more than the rest. I spent the day tying up loose ends, canceled the internet, took my name off the lease, changed my direct deposit. Each task felt strangely satisfying, like checking items off a list I should have written years ago. When I came back to the apartment that evening to grab the rest of my things, Julian was waiting on the couch, perfectly put together, the version of him he used when he wanted leverage. He patted the cushion beside him. "Sit. Let's talk like adults." I stayed standing. He sighed dramatically. "I didn't mean what I said. You know that I was frustrated. You pushed me to say things." That sentence almost impressed me. The confidence with which he rewrote reality was something I'd grown used to. He reached for my hand. "We're married. You don't just walk away because your ego got bruised." That's when I felt it again. That quiet, steady clarity. "It wasn't my ego," I said. "It was my self-respect." His expression hardened instantly. "Oh, please. This is about you wanting validation. You think a bigger job makes you bigger." I smiled, not sarcastically, just calmly. "No," I said. "It just makes me gone." He stood up fast. "You're making a huge mistake. You'll crawl back. They always do." I picked up my last box. "No," I said again. "I won't." He followed me to the door, voice raised now, sharp and desperate. "You really think you're going to do better than me?" I paused, hand on the knob. "I already am," I said. I left that night and slept on a friend's couch. My flight was at 6 a.m. By the time Julian realized I wasn't bluffing, I was already in the air. Phone off, marriage behind me, and a version of myself he never thought I'd choose. New York hit me like cold water to the face, in a good way. The city didn't care that my marriage had just detonated. It didn't slow down for my emotions or ask for context. It moved fast, unapologetic, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. I moved with it. The first week was chaos. Temporary apartment, endless onboarding meetings, learning subway lines like survival skills. I slept 4 hours a night and lived on coffee and street food. And somehow, despite the exhaustion, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not happy yet, but unburdened. Julian tried again on day 3. His message popped up while I was walking back to my place after work. "Can we talk like adults now?" I didn't answer. Then came the pivot. "I miss you. This is weird without you. I didn't realize how quiet the apartment would be." That one almost worked. Almost. But then he followed it with, "You didn't have to embarrass me like this." There it was. Not I hurt you. Not I crossed a line. Just how it made him look. That's when I blocked his number. Work consumed me after that. The role was bigger than anything I'd done before. People expected things from me and listened when I spoke. No eye rolls, no sighs, no subtle reminders that I should be grateful just to be tolerated. 2 weeks in, my manager pulled me aside and told me I was already outperforming expectations. He said it like it was a simple fact. No buildup, no manipulation. I walked home that night, through streets full of noise and strangers, and felt something settle into place. I wasn't proving Julian wrong. I was proving myself right. By the end of the first month, my divorce paperwork was filed. Clean, efficient, no dramatic phone calls, no closure conversations, just signatures and silence. Julian tried one last time through email. "You really threw us away for a job." I didn't respond because it wasn't a job, it was my life. And for the first time in a long time, it actually felt like mine. 6 months went by faster than I expected. Not in a blur, but in layers. New routines replacing old ones. Morning runs along streets I couldn't name at first. A favorite deli that knew my order. Colleagues who invited me out without asking about my personal life like it was an open wound. I didn't date right away. Not because I was broken. Because I was quiet. I wanted to hear my own thoughts without someone narrating them for me. Julian tried to break the silence twice during those months. Once through LinkedIn. That one actually made me laugh. Hope NYC is treating you well. I blocked him there too. By month 5, I felt solid. Not euphoric. Solid. The kind of grounded that doesn't need witnesses. That's when I met Caleb. It wasn't dramatic. No sparks flying across a crowded room. We met at a bookstore, both reaching for the same copy of something we'd already read. He smiled, apologized, and made a joke that wasn't trying too hard. Coffee followed. Then another. Then dinners that didn't feel like performances. Caleb listened, not like he was collecting data, like he actually wanted to understand. He didn't test me, didn't compare me, didn't ask what my 5-year plan said about him. One Saturday afternoon, we were walking through Soho, hands brushing but not quite holding, and I felt that quiet certainty again, the same one I'd felt the night I said, "You're right." This was easy, honest, undemanding. 2 weeks later, we were officially together. No announcements, no social media, just reality. I didn't think about Julian anymore. Not until the night everything started to collide. The city settled into me the way a new language does. Awkward at first, then suddenly fluent. Days stacked fast. Meetings bled into evenings. Evenings into quiet dinners with Caleb that didn't feel like auditions. I wasn't performing competence anymore. I was just competent. Caleb didn't rush anything. He didn't ask where this was going or what it meant that I still flinched at certain phrases. He noticed without interrogating. When I canceled once because work exploded, he said, "Next time," like it was obvious there would be one. That steadiness did something to me. It rewired my nervous system. I stopped bracing before conversations. I stopped rehearsing explanations. I stopped shrinking my ambition to make space for someone else's insecurity. Julian resurfaced anyway. Not directly. Not yet. It started with mutuals. Subtle pings through old connections who suddenly wanted to check in. One text said, "Julian asked how you're doing." Another said, "He's having a hard time." I didn't respond. Silence had become my most honest boundary. Work kept expanding. Bigger projects, more responsibility. People trusted me with decisions that mattered. One afternoon, my manager asked me to lead a presentation I would have begged out of a year ago. I said yes without thinking. When it was over, the room stayed quiet for a beat, then filled with questions that assumed I had answers. I walked back to my desk buzzing, not from validation, but from alignment. At home, Caleb cooked with the windows open and music low. He chopped vegetables like it was a meditation. We talked about books, about trips neither of us rushed to plan, about nothing, and somehow that felt like everything. I didn't realize how rare that peace was until it was interrupted. It happened on a Thursday night. I was leaving the office late when my phone lit up with an unknown number. No introduction, just a sentence that made my stomach drop. "I didn't know you were in New York too." I stared at it longer than I should have. Then another message followed. "Julian, I ran into someone from your old team." There it was. The door he'd been circling, finally pushed open. I didn't reply. I put my phone face down and kept walking. The city moved on around me like it always did. When I got home, Caleb noticed immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked, not pressing, just present. I nodded. It was mostly true. The next day, another message came through. "I just wanted to know if you're happy." That one was different. Not cruel, not defensive, curious in a way that felt invasive, like he was trying to peek behind a wall he'd already torn down. I typed a response, deleted it, then locked my phone. I wasn't here to re-enter old conversations. Later that weekend, Caleb and I went to a small rooftop bar. Nothing fancy. Warm lights, soft music, the kind of place that felt like a pause button. I went to grab drinks. When I turned back, I saw Julian. He was standing near the bar, frozen, staring at Caleb like he'd discovered something out of place. Our eyes met, his face drained of color. I watched the realization ripple through him in real time, the recalculation, the shock, the understanding that I hadn't stalled without him. I walked back, handed Caleb his drink, and introduced him calmly. Julian didn't say a word. He nodded, tight smile, glassy eyes. I didn't linger, didn't explain, didn't apologize. The past didn't need translation. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I didn't know you'd moved on." I didn't reply. I went back to Caleb, who was talking about a trip he wanted to take in the fall. I listened, actually listened. And that's how I knew how far removed Julian already was from my life. He'd become background noise the moment I chose not to engage. But the collision had consequences, and I could feel them gathering. The next morning, there was another message waiting. Seeing you like that hurt more than I expected. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I missed him, because I recognized the tone. It wasn't grief. It wasn't accountability. It was shock. The shock that the story had continued without his permission. Against my better judgment, I replied once. I didn't stay frozen where you left me. The dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. I didn't think you'd actually leave, he wrote. I thought you just needed space. I thought you'd cool off and come back. There it was. The assumption that I was an extension of his timeline, not a person with one of my own. He followed it quickly with another line. She doesn't know you like I do. That almost worked on an older version of me. Almost. I typed back one sentence. That's the point. I didn't hear from him for a week after that. And in that silence, something else surfaced. Not from Julian. From the edges of my new life. It started small. Caleb's phone lighting up late at night. A name he didn't mention. He never hid it, never angled the screen away, but I noticed the pause before he answered. The way his shoulders tensed, just slightly. One evening, while we were cooking, he said it casually, like he didn't want to give it more weight than necessary. My ex-girlfriend reached out again. She heard I was seeing someone. I didn't ask questions right away. I didn't need to. I knew the type. Everyone does. The ones who don't want you, but don't want anyone else to have you either. She'd been a part of his life for years, he explained. On and off, familiar, comfortable, loud when things weren't going her way. She didn't like that he'd gone quiet. She liked being the narrator. I felt a flicker of something. Not jealousy, recognition. The pattern was familiar. Different people, same script. That night, Julian sent the longest message yet. Apologies mixed with justifications, regret braided tightly with blame. He said he was brutally honest, not cruel. Said I was supposed to be strong enough to handle it. Said he never thought I'd actually choose myself over the marriage. That line stuck with me. I never thought you'd choose yourself. I didn't reply, because I already had. The following weekend, Caleb and I cooked dinner at my place. Music low, windows open, no tension, no walking on eggshells. At one point, he laughed at something stupid I said, and leaned his head against my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's when I realized something simple and final. Love wasn't loud. It didn't threaten. It didn't test your worth. Julian sent one last message that night. Do you ever miss me? I deleted the thread. Not out of anger, out of closure. But the threads he pulled had already tugged something else loose, because 2 days later, Caleb's ex-girlfriend didn't text him. She texted me. And that's when I understood this wasn't just about Julian realizing too late. It was about how some people don't accept endings unless they get to author them. Her message didn't pretend to be polite. It didn't introduce itself. It arrived like an accusation disguised as curiosity. I didn't know he moved on so fast. I stared at the screen, pulse steady. Not because it hurt, because it confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't coincidence. This was coordination. I replied once. He didn't move on fast. He moved on forward. She didn't answer right away. Then the typing bubble appeared, vanished, reappeared. Finally, the message landed. I just think you should know who he really is. There it was. The same move. Different woman. Same script. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need the details packaged as concern. I typed one sentence and ended it. I'm not interested in rewriting someone else's past to justify my present. She didn't reply after that. But the damage she hoped to cause didn't land where she wanted it to. Because Caleb told me everything that same night without being asked. He didn't rush. He didn't defend. He didn't minimize. He explained, owned what was his, and didn't ask me to carry any of it for him. That's how I knew the difference. Julian had always needed me to absorb his discomfort. Caleb didn't. A week passed. Then another. Julian stayed quiet until he didn't. The message came late on a Sunday night. Different number, same energy. I saw you again today. I didn't have to ask how. Mutual circles shrink faster than people think. I locked my phone and set it down. Caleb was in the kitchen humming, barefoot, stirring something that smelled like garlic and comfort. 5 minutes later, another text. You look happy. That one almost felt honest. Almost. I picked up the phone and read the rest that followed in a rush, like he'd finally stopped editing himself. I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. I thought you'd always be there. I didn't mean it the way it came out. I was angry at myself and took it out on you. There were tears in those words. Real ones, I think. But there was something else underneath. Panic. The realization that the floor he thought was solid had been standing on me. He ended with, I just needed you to know I finally understand. I exhaled slowly. Caleb leaned against the counter and asked, "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, and it was true. I typed one last response. "I believe you understand now." But understanding came too late. No blame, no lecture, no reopening doors. The dots appeared, then vanished. That was it. I blocked the number and felt nothing dramatic. No triumph, no sadness, just completion. Later that night, Caleb curled up next to me on the couch and rested his head against my chest. He didn't ask about the phone, didn't need to. And that's when it really hit me. The loudest regret in Julian's life wasn't losing me. It was realizing he'd mistaken patience for permanence and taught me how to walk away. A year after everything blew up, I stood by the window of my apartment and watched the city do what it always did. Move forward without waiting for anyone to catch up. Caleb was behind me, still half asleep, wrapped in one of my shirts, scrolling through his phone. We had plans later. Nothing big, lunch with friends, maybe a walk, normal things, the kind that used to feel impossible. I thought about that night, the fight, the sentence, the way Julian had said it like a verdict. "You really think you're the best I can do?" Back then, he expected fear, expected negotiation. He didn't expect agreement. What he never understood was that the moment someone questions your value out loud, the relationship is already over. They're not speaking in anger. They're revealing hierarchy. I didn't leave to punish him. I didn't leave to prove anything. I left because once you see how someone truly sees you, you can't unsee it. Julian reached out once more through a mutual friend, asking how I was doing. I told him to tell him I was fine. That was the truth. Nothing more needed to be said. Caleb looked up and smiled. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. And again, it was true. Not because everything worked out perfectly, but because I didn't betray myself to keep someone else comfortable. I took the promotion. I left the next day. I rebuilt my life without announcing it. And when he finally saw me with someone new, happy, unbothered, that's when reality landed. Not as revenge, not as justice, just consequence. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't anger, it's agreement and walking away.